Good night, a wonderful good night to you all, whether you're in Guyana or in the diaspora. We want to welcome you to another discussion on the never-ending saga of the post-election that we have been embroiled in for the past 100 plus days. That's 100 plus. That's more than, it's going to be 4 months very, very soon. And of course, this happened, this unfolding activities have been ongoing since the confidence motion, more than probably going on to 2 years now. So it's been a ride. Guyanese are tired. The population is tired. Media is tired. Leaders from all sides, are tired. And it's having an impact. The political pandemic is having an impact on every sector of Guyana. And that's our discussion tonight. We want to talk about that political pandemic. Of course, the political pandemic predates the COVID pandemic. So we've been in this for quite a while, and it's taking a toll. We have three wonderful guests to discuss these items. But before we go further, there was, of course, a very bold statement by the chairman of CARICOM, Ms. Mia Motley. And for those of you who may not have seen it during the course of today, it was launched today. We'll give you an opportunity to get a quick view at it. It's a short video. And we'll ask our guests to kind of respond to it, and we'll get and it'll be a good start to our discussion tonight on the unfolding saga on this election. So, Devin, if you can play that video for those who may not have seen it, it's definitely eye-opening. It's definitely to the point. And it's definitely not what Guyanese or the Caribbean or those around the world who wants to see a better Guyana want to hear.
This is definitely not our finest hour, and we must not shy away from that reality. The Caribbean community is concerned at reports that the Chief Elections Officer has submitted a report to the Guyana Elections Commission, which is contrary to the directions given by the Commission, and which does not reflect the results of the recount process as certified by the very staff of the Guyana Elections Commission and indeed witnessed by representatives of the political parties. Indeed, these numbers and the certification of them were also witnessed by our CARICOM observer team. They traveled to Guyana in spite of the pandemic and the risks to themselves, and they scrutinized the recount process. The CARICOM observer team was of the unshakable belief that the people of Guyana expressed their will at the ballot box on March 2nd, and that the results of the recount certified as valid by the staff of the Guyana Elections Commission led to an orderly conclusion on which the declaration of the results of the election could and would be made. Therefore, we must ask, on what grounds and by what form of executive fiat does the Chief Elections Officer determine that he should invalidate one vote, far less over 115,000 votes, when the votes were already certified as valid by the officers of the Guyana Elections Commission in the presence of the said political parties? We must remind all that if there is any evidence of fraudulent or improper conduct, then there is a clear and well-accepted route to deal with these matters. It is through an election petition to an election court. Any attempt to provide numbers different from those certified by the staff of the Guyana Elections Commission has left many in shock and wondering what next will happen to frustrate the will of the Guyanese people. The role and focus of political parties must be useful and not obstructive in embracing and promoting the clear and express will of the people. And when we confuse and frustrate that will is when we begin to sow the very seeds of discord and acrimony that we are sworn to dissuade and discourage.
Thank you, Devin. And there you have it. Very straight to the point. She used some very, very strong words that sides on the that's on the side of democracy for Guyana. With me to discuss what we've just heard and a lot more are three no stranger to our audience, and certainly guys with great insight and who are active players on the ground at various levels. We have a PPP member, Bishop Juan Edgehill. Welcome, Bishop, to our show tonight. We also have leader of the Liberty and Justice Party, Lennox Schumann, who's been very, very, very active on all fronts, and I'm quite sure he's feeling that frustration that Mia has just addressed. And we have president of the Guyana Chamber of Commerce, the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce, and he'll be sharing his thoughts on this. And we've had statements today also from other sectors in the Guyana landscape that addressed what we've heard. So this was, of course, what Mia just described, guys. Was the CEO's report, the bizarre report, as I said. You know, it's really kind of weird how he got the numbers and whatever he did, but it was definitely bizarre. It shocked everyone, and Mia had to go to the cameras, you know, and vent. You know, she used words like "sad day," does not reflect the will. Frustrate the will. You know, these are strong words for a party that is unwilling to concede in what appears to be, from all angles, a credible and fair process. So, with that, I want to hand it over maybe to the bishop to get his take on what we heard from Mia Motley, chairman of CARICOM.
Thank you, Salim, and let me say good evening to all of your viewers and to salute my two colleagues who are guests as well on this program this evening, Nicholas and Lennox. Good evening. We should begin from the standpoint that here it is, the de facto president, David Granger, said to the whole world that CARICOM is the most legitimate interlocutor as it relates to the political crisis that we are in at this time in Guyana, which is wholly orchestrated by operatives within GCOM, aided and abetted by the APNU AFC. Fraud. We are talking here about electoral fraud. I don't know if the consideration of Mr. Granger was that because of the ethnocentric composition of the CARICOM region, that he figured that he would have gotten an outcome that favored wrongdoing. I was one of the counting agents for the PPPC during those 33 days. Lennox was there almost every day, I think every day. Those three individuals conducted themselves in a very professional manner. Their report, which is something that Mr. Granger is not talking about at all, was one that I think was professionally done and captured the reality of what took place. Mm-hmm. We had 10 certificates. I witnessed the signing of the final certificate for Region 4 when we returned the next day after the counting was finished. Everybody in the room was happy. They were quite satisfied that the process was transparent and fair. Mr. Lowenfield was instructed to use the results of the recount and bring a report to GCOM. God in heaven knows what was the discussion, the agreements, and the backrooming, I would call it, And he brought a report to GCOM that is practically worse than what Claimant Mingo did at the Ashman building. Mia Motley, chairperson of CARICOM, Prime Minister of Barbados, had to speak to this issue today, and as a Guyanese, I am outraged like the tens of thousands of Guyanese that we have people who would stoop to such depths of depravity, who would engage in such wickedness and deceit that they will be willing to even use their statutory office as chief elections officer to carry out electoral fraud, to put a government in office who did not win the elections. And this seems to have been the grand plot of the APNU AFC within the rogue, with the rogue element within GCOM to ensure an electoral victory for the APNU AFC at all costs. It doesn't matter the will of the people. So Claimant Mingo did try that twice. He did not get through. Now Lowenfield is trying it. But Salim and my colleagues, I'm here, like Mia Motley, and the Commonwealth Secretary General, as well as the ambassadors of the American, the British, the Canadian, and the European Union, and all the others, the private sector, and all the others who have spoken. I am convinced that this wickedness of electoral fraud being spearheaded by the chief elections officer, who was presumptuous enough to present such a fictitious report to the commission without any justification, deducting 115,000 plus votes with the sole intent to give a victory to his political masters.
Yeah. So if I can bring Shuman into the discussion now. Shuman, you were a very, very vocal, very active on social media and on the ground during the entire course of the recount. When you heard the CEO's report, were you shocked at all? Was this something you were expecting? What went through your mind when you saw that report was released on Monday?
Well, let me first say good afternoon to your viewers. Good afternoon, my colleagues, Juan and Nick, and yourself and the viewers. It's good to be on the show again. I want to support what Juan has been saying there, about how offensive it is not only to Guyanese, but to the international community to be at this juncture. And I want to take us back, a little bit further back, if I were to put it that way. Who attempted to do this, he was caught red-handed, and he was stopped by the court, and then again he declared, and then Madam Chair said, we are going to undertake a recount. There have been two attempts at prior to the recount, at which Mr. Mingo declared two separate set of numbers. We went through the process of the recount, and the APNU AFC agents did every single thing that they possibly could to try to thwart that process from going forward, try to undermine that process. And on May 6th, when we started off in this process, my remarks were very clear that they could not rig the elections, they could not rig the results, and they cannot rig the recount. So what they're going to try to do is to undermine the process. And we saw through the entire process how that machinery was going to be rolled out. There would have been no, and there still is no formula under which the PNC or APNU AFC would lose these elections that they're willing to concede that they have lost. Mr. Lowenfield thus far, within the span of under 2 weeks, has presented two separate set of reports reflecting two separate numbers. So right now we are on attempt number 4 with numbers number 4, and no one knows how they come on to these numbers. No one knows that. And every single thing that they have been trying to do once again They are pushing against the collective will of not only Guyana and Guyanese, but against the entire Western democracies. You look at an organization like the OAS, you've got 36 signatory nations on that says, we were there, we saw what happened, we witnessed the elections, we witnessed the recount, and the government does not want to do that. 36 countries represented by the OAS. The CARICOM team came and saw the electoral process. They supervised, granted they didn't want to supervise. They oversaw the recount process. The ABCs and E's were there through the electoral process, through the recount. You had GCCI, the PSC, AmCham, the Ethnic Relations Commission, the Bar Association, plus all political parties were present through this process.
Yeah.
And now you are going to say that the process in itself was tainted. I think Timothy Jonas went to great lengths to explain the impossibility of infiltrating this. And I think Jerry Gavai also did the very same thing. But Salim, you ask a very interesting question, because I will tell you yesterday, 2 days ago, when the Court of Appeal ruled that they could amend the Constitution just by their 2-to-1 ruling of the words most votes, Constitution, valid votes. I think that has been discussed ad nauseum by the legal minds. But I want to say that we are of the firm belief that the appeals court erred, and we are taking that to the CCJ. We are actually parties named to that case before the CCJ. But I want to tell you that when Mr. Lowenfield rolled out those numbers, where it gave the APNU AFC a 33, PPP 31, and the joiner 1, when he rolled out those numbers, there was a sinking feeling in this country. And I will tell you that that is not confined, that sinking feeling is not confined to only people who voted for the PPP and the smaller parties. There are also members of the APNU AFC who are completely insulted and embarrassed at the party's performance, thus holding on to power.
Yeah.
So we have seen every single person that comes out and says, you know what, respect the recount, respect these numbers, respect the laws of Guyana. They have come out and tried to tarnish their good character. When Mia Motley committed to this recount as the interlocutor, the entire APNU AFC went up in praise. Oh yes, you know, we have to trust our CARICOM partners, Mia Motley, a woman of integrity and all these things. Now today, after she issued the statement, and that statement is very pointed and head-on, when she issued that statement, you should look at social media and what the APNU AFC hooligans, if I were to put it that way, are saying about her.
Yeah,
it is a disgrace, it is a national disgrace to be at this juncture and to watch our population behave in such a manner. And the very unfortunate thing is that the leadership of the APNU AFC has done absolutely nothing to quell that kind of embarrassment and insult, or to bring their supporters in line and say we have to respect the democratic norms and we cannot treat heads of state in that manner because it does not bode well for Guyana's image internationally. It does not bode well for us as international partners, amongst a whole host of things.
Yeah, but
I will also morning when I woke up, the amount of messages that I got with people saying that they're very happy that the CCJ has injuncted the Guyana Elections Commission from presenting those numbers, from deliberating on them. A lot of people were very happy because the fact that the CCJ is intervening, I think we have better than fantastic chances of ensuring that we get this right. It is a very important point, and I have not seen any leadership from the APNU AFC come out and say, you know what, we are going to lead. We're going to lead our people. They have not done that.
Right, and I think Mia Motley, stated it rightly in terms of the level of frustration that's been brought into the society because of what's happening. Nicholas, I want to get you in here. The Private Sector Commission, they had a statement, I think, earlier today also, where they called the CEO's report fraudulent. That's the word they used, and they called for his suspension. You in the private sector, that kind of behavior would have been, a justification for an on-the-spot firing. Your chairman has summoned you, and you've decided not to show up a week later with some fake makeup document. I know GCCI might have also make some statements. You're on a different receiving end of this pandemic, this political pandemic. What are your take on the statement today by CARICOM, and how is this unfolding, and how do you see things happening?
Right. Well, so the thing is that businesses here are hurting. Right. We're suffering from the economic effects of the coronavirus, and then on top of that, from January of this year, we've been suffering the effects of a prolonged election season. I've said it time and time again, in the third world, when you go into an election year, businesses don't usually invest until the elections process is complete. Absolutely. So businesses have held back on that investment and above average consumption, or let's say above just keeping the lights on type of consumption. So the businesses have been hunkered down, one, from the election season since January. And then in March, you had patient zero for the coronavirus around March 12th. So that has compounded. Now, the thing is that businesses were looking forward to at least a completion of the man-made crisis, which is the elections one, because that is within human control. The coronavirus is outside of human control, so to speak. I mean, you can follow lockdown orders, you can take a certain number of measures. But outside taking those measures, there's very little else that you can do. But with the elections, that is within complete man-made control. Now, we released we wrote a letter to the chair of the Elections Commission last week. So this was around last week, Monday or Tuesday, saying that we were concerned with the performance of Mr. Lowenfield today because we had noticed various bits of evidence where it showed that he had a bias towards the APNU AFC, meaning that he did not do anything, given that they now had the recount numbers, they have their original SOPs in possession, and they clearly saw that Mr. Claremont Mingo, the returning officer for District 4, inflated those numbers. In addition to that, he allowed himself, because when you say he presented his report, this was part 2 of his report. Part 1 of his report was where he summarized the observations that were made. Now, when he did that first summary of the observation report, it was leaked to us and we did some analysis. What Mr. Lowenfield put into those observation reports was the undistilled, just raw objections that the APNU AFC counting agents made during the recount. Now, what your listeners have to understand is that so let's say in a ballot box of about 80 some people, the APNU AFC went and made objections, in some cases 50, if not the full 80 some persons on the list, saying that these persons were either impersonating dead persons and voting, or they were impersonating persons who were migrated and could not have been in the jurisdiction and voted. When they would go with these complaints, in all of the times I was an observer, and I, at the start of the exercise, I did roughly around 1 to 3 complete days, and then when they allowed for a shift system, I did 3 to 4 half days every week, right? And in all of the observing, and this is me personally, because we worked in conjunction with the Private Sector Commission, and together with some other organizations, which Lennox had mentioned in his intro, we actually had 100% coverage of all the workstations. And in my personal observations, you would only have maybe one or two of these serial numbers that would have been ticked off, meaning that the person had entered the polling station, right? Now, Keith Lowenfield, at a first stage, didn't even distill down from the total number of objections to the actual numbers that were marked off, right? Secondly, there's no way to actually verify those objections, because when the APNU AFC counting agents went to the recount with those objections, they would make them, but it was only the GCOM staff that would peruse this list. So therefore, no one actually saw what you call the marked list of electors. It was only GCOM staff that saw it. So we're essentially relying on what the GCOM staff are saying. So you cannot then take that and start to use that data to materially impact the number of votes, because the recount process went this way. At the end of each ballot box, all the party agents signed on a statement of recount. And then at the end of the day, all of those statements of recounts were then tabulated and signed to produce a certificate for the district or the region. And then Keith Lowenfield was expected to tabulate these together.
So Nicholas, I want to ask you a quick answer to this question here. Do you feel that his report was an unfair? It was unfair to the staff of GCOM itself, who did this work for many, who were trained to get it done, did it on election day, did it the week post-election to get results, and here he is, put that all aside and just created his own whatever sheet.
The thing is that from the APN UFC to Mr. Lowenfield, they have been willing to throw. For the APN UFC, it was their party agents who were there at the polling station signing on the and for GCOM, it is them willing to throw their staff who acted very professionally on the day of under the bus. And it was almost amazing. And I think the culmination of that was the East Coast boxes, where you saw them willing to throw the presiding officers, and a few of them spoke up and said, no. It was the returning officer and the assistant, the assistants that gave us specific instructions for the East Coast not to put those statutory documents in the ballot boxes. Yeah. Therefore, we came to the conclusion and wrote the chair that Keith Lowenfield was biased. And then when he presented, so this was when he presented his summary of the observation report, when he then went ahead and ignored the instructions basically from the chair, where she made a decision, it only proved the bias further. And today you had a number of organizations from CARICOM, Private Sector Commission. I
want to get the bishop back into the conversation. I listened a lot today by various commentator, and your good friend Nagamutu, Bishop. He was talking about the victory of APNU, and he used the word victory, and he used the word swearing in and soon and all that kind of stuff. When asked about the CARICOM statement today, he said CARICOM only examined 18%, and it was somewhat credible. What's your response to what the language on the ground is from the APNU voices, led by, of course, guys like Moses Nagamutu and others who are clearly misguiding their their membership to say that, hey, forget about the CARICOM. They didn't even see much. They only see 18%. And this is ours. We won this thing, and yet it's still in the court. And they're all saying the same thing too, that the court doesn't really matter. So, Bishop, put that in perspective for us.
Well, the first thing I would say here tonight, I don't practice the habit of ridiculing people. But Mr. Nagamootoo is a rank opportunist. That is what he is, a rank opportunist. He's singing for his supper. And I would want to now put him as a member of the lunatic fringe elements of the APNU AFC. You know, the Sherrod Duncans and the Christopher Jones and the James Bond and Aubrey Norton and that whole Rickford Burke, that whole lunatic fringe group who says things willy-nilly without any basis. They don't check their facts. They just sell propaganda. And then we have a group of people in the country who don't read, who don't examine, who don't analyze things. They just jump up and they repeat and regurgitate what was said. Mr. Nagamootoo has disgraced himself, number one, as a lawyer, number two, as a politician, and number three, as someone who prides himself as being a champion for the restoration of democracy in Guyana. Mr. Nagamootoo is now presenting himself as a selfish, self-serving, opportunistic individual who will do anything to stay in power to benefit from the perks of office. In a democracy, it's not the end of the world when you lose an election.
Absolutely.
Mr. Nagamootoo, if he wants to redeem himself, must bring copies of the statements of poll that he saw since March 3rd or March 4th to show him that the APNU AFC won. Up until now, he can't bring it out because he hasn't seen it, because he's just a stooge following the directions of people who are bent on rigging, speaking lies, manufacturing controversies, and sinking to depths of depravity that is unbelievable. So my pronouncement on Mr. Nagamootoo is that he's a shameless creature who should disappear from Guyana permanently. He has no place and he has no contribution for the good of Guyana because he's selfish and self-serving. But he has just joined a list of those in the APNU AFC who have behaved similarly. Now,
on the same question, I want you to elaborate a little bit more. On the same question, how dangerous is the APNU voices on the ground when they're dispelling all the numbers that's out there that clearly shows a lead by the PPP? How dangerous is this language, not only for all of Guyana, but especially to their own membership and voters?
It is extremely dangerous. And I believe it is agitating for conflict because the likes of Mr. Nagamootoo are telling APNU AFC supporters they won the elections. Just before the start of this program, I got a call from Ibini in the Berbice River. Ibini in the Berbice River. And the gentleman was asking me, Bishop, is it true that the APNU AFC won the elections? And I have to go through explaining to him, no, Mr. Lowenfield put in a fraudulent report, which was worse than the Mingo's report. I have to go through the full 9 yards. When you go to social media and Salim, I'm a Christian and I'm a Christian leader. I see some of my colleagues from the Christian community celebrating and giving God thanks for the miracles and the blessings that he has done to ensure that the APNU AFC won the elections. When the truth of the matter is, there is nothing in fact, substance, or anything in evidence to support that position. So it is that lunatic fringe group that has been spurting out daily doses of deception and wickedness and misinformation and I don't know what else to say, just downright evil and then Mr. Nagamutu, who controls the Chronicle, the NCN, and the DPI, comes out with a kind of a shameless approach. It is damaging our country because when you are a leader, people trust you for some level or not. And here it is, rather than them telling the truth, they're lying to their people. Dominic Gaskin has already come out and spoken that there is no basis for the APNU AFC to claim victory. But you have these people keep spreading misinformation and spreading hate, and it is creating conflict. Because when the truth of Irfan Ali being the next president of Guyana is declared, remember you have these people 114 days feeding them. It's only a matter of time. We're going to get back there. God is on our side. Everything is working well. Jadjo tried to rig the elections. Jadjo brought in people from dead people to vote. He manufactured and impersonated people. And Nagamutu and Granger buys into that Harmon, Volder, Basil Williams, Trustman continues along with a lunatic French element and keeps putting out such. You're creating the groundwork for conflict between two opposing political forces because there's only one winner you could have in the elections. And Salim, allow me to say this. Guyana must be extremely grateful to the General Secretary of the PPP, Dr. Barrett Jagdeo, for the leadership that he has provided throughout this entire period. Because PPP supporters could have been extremely agitated and it could have caused serious problems. But it is the leadership that was provided to the PPPC and to the nation at this time that has kept us sane. Compare that with a lack of leadership from the APNU AFC side, where their people are just creating environment of hate, animosity. They're almost delusional, deceptive in their approach, invoking all kinds of religious chantings and declarations as if God is the one who is working this thing out. And it is the evil PPP that is preventing them from getting into office, when the fact of the matter is the statements of Paul on March 3rd showed the PPPC won the elections. Mingo tried to change that with a fraudulent declaration. It was the statements of recount that showed that the PPPC won these elections at June 9th, whenever that was, the final numbers were tabulated. And it is now Lowenfield that is trying to put in a fraudulent report, and you're trying to blame the other side of committing fraud. It is disgusting and unbelievable that men who held high office would even speak to their people and utter such lies and untruth and deception, and it must come to an end.
So, Bishop, you're very close to the PPP, closer than any one of us here, I guess. And there is a petition with the CCJ that's going to be heard, I think, from tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. Give us a very short status on that and on what viewers can expect from CCJ tomorrow, and maybe and how this will impact what's happening so far.
Well, tomorrow the CCJ will have what is called a CMC, a case management conference. All of the lawyers representing the various parties will have an opportunity to get settled timelines when they have to make their submissions and their responses. On July 1st, the CCJ will hear oral arguments and thereafter make a decision. Because what the CCJ, the questions that the CCJ is asked to pronounce on are the questions that open the cesspool for Lowenfield to present his figures to the chairman of GCOM, disenfranchising and invalidating 115,000 valid votes to give the PNC-led APNU AFC victory. So for us, the CCJ, as the highest court that we have signed on to in the country, will pronounce on these matters. And you will recall, if we didn't have the CCJ, the Court of Appeal would have overturned the no confidence vote as being invalid because they said 34 is the majority. But thank God that we were able in our foresight and leadership when the PPPC was in office to move Guyana into the CCJ to have an external review because the Court of Appeal, how it was set up, remember it was Burnham's way of remaining in office perpetually for life because he wanted nothing to do with the Privy Council or any external review. And now you're having the same situation with the PNC-led APNU where they're fooling their people. The Court of Appeal decision is final and Lowenfield would be the one to validate votes and we will get the victory. This is the nonsense. So for us in the PPPC, I'm glad that our leaders had the foresight in as much as the orders that they sought, as when David sought at the Court of Appeal was not granted. Just that one interpretation of putting in valid votes where more votes are cast open a floodgate for and embolden the wickedness of Lowenfield to present that kind of report. And had it not been for the interim order that was granted, restraining GCOM from making a declaration, we would have had a haggling right now at GCOM about which figures to use to declare a winner. And you would have had the Alexanders of this world center stage advocating that these are the untainted, credible numbers, so the APNU AFC must get office at all costs. But that kind of a wickedness will not stand in Guyana.
And with that, I want to get Shuman's thoughts on the CCJ. What are your thoughts on what will unfold over tomorrow, of course, and over the next 2-3 weeks, hopefully not months? And where is this going to be taking us?
Salim, I want to touch on the question you asked Ed Hill there. In terms of what Mr. Nagamutu and his ilk are doing, it is dangerously driving the country to the brink of civil war. And I have said that time and time again. I communicated that in very explicit terms to the CARICOM heads of state when we met with them before the recount, before they agreed to the recount. I said the irresponsible leadership of certain political parties, and I didn't want to name them because I'm sure they had full grasp of what was going on. That irresponsible leadership is bringing this country to the brink of civil war. And what Mr. Nagamutu and his ilk, all of these so-called previous political giants, you have to remember before they became an alliance, Moses Nagamutu went out on stage and lambasted. Moses Nagamutu, Raphael Trotman, Kemraj Ramjatan, all of them went out on stage and lambasted the PNC as a rigging cabal. And now they themselves are party to the very same things that they fought so very hard to protect Guyana against. So what they have done is strewn their supporters to this point, and very much along the lines of what Edgel is saying, to the point where if it is to be determined, which I am very confident it will be determined, that the People's Progressive Party would have won these elections based on all the numbers that we have seen. I was part of that process. When that happens, their irresponsible leadership now puts the lives of many Guyanese on both sides, on all the sides, in danger because of their rhetoric and what they have done to Guyana. There is no sense of responsibility that they are going to take. You don't see them on the street protesting. You don't see them, at the court holding a placard. And when the violence starts, and I hope that it doesn't, you're not going to see the Moses Nagamu at the front. You're not going to see the Joe Harmon. You're not going to see the David Granger, the Kathy Hughes, and their ilk. Those people will be reclused in some corner, urging their fighters to go and fight while they cower in their corners. This is unfortunate. That is not what leadership is about. In terms of where we are with this CCJ process, once again, we are challenging that the appeals court had no jurisdiction. And I want to say that from looking at the ruling of the 33-32 issue at the NCM and looking at the judges, I somewhat expected this. And what Edgehill said in opening the floodgates for Mr. Lowenfield to do that, when the recount was finished, Mr. Lowenfield was merely served with a notice. Correction, let's go back to Mr. Mingo. When an injunction was filed against Mr. Mingo, Mr. Lowenfield went against GCOM. Mr. Lowenfield went ahead and produced that report. That is how he produced the report for the commission to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Now, fast forward to a few weeks ago, like a week and a half ago, served with a notice of a motion. He said, I can't do this because I've been served with a notice. There was nothing stopping him from doing that. And imagine the Court of Appeal simply ruled that more votes means more valid votes. And within 24 hours, there is a turnaround that he could produce a report with those fraudulent numbers. And I want to go back to what Nick opened with a little bit earlier, that Mr. Lowenfield is highly, highly compromised. The fact that he continues to remain there, the whole country should be worried, regardless of which side you're on. The whole country. Imagine if the tables were turned and the People's Progressive Party, Civic, was in that position, what the status of this country would be in right now. I would want to say that Georgetown would be looking like it just came out of the middle of Syria in terms of the destruction that may be upon us. Mm-hmm. And I want to correct Edgehill on one point. I don't think that it is only the leadership of the People's Progressive Party, Civic, that needs to be commended. I want to commend the leadership of all the political parties that stood up for democracy. Those are the people.
I agree with you, Lennox. I agree with you. My apologies. I agree with you on that, sir.
Those are the people that continue to do the work day in and day out. It is a collective effort in securing democracy in this country and ensuring that we're on the right path. So in terms of going forward, we expect that through the case management conference tomorrow, that our legal teams will present our arguments and that there is scope for it to be heard at the Caribbean Court of Justice. And when that hearing is presented on the 1st of July, that we are going to be vindicated in our position, which we have maintained that it is beyond the remit of the Court of Appeal to engage at this juncture anything in relation to the election. Now, I want to look a little bit beyond the first.
I want to get Nick into the conversation here. Nick, what's your response on on what Nagamutu has been saying as it relates to that 18% that CARICOM saw only, and of course, how dangerous are these kind of language given our situation?
Well, I'll make a short response to that, allow for the Bishop for Lennox, because it's more a political answer. But what I can tell you is just based on pure data. CARICOM sent a team of 3 persons, so they could only physically, see so many boxes. That 18% is speaking about their direct observation, right? In other words, that they were physically present. Now, the CARICOM team received SORs, observation reports, and other documents from every station. Every station produced the SORs, every station produced a copy of the SORs, the observation reports, the ballot box checklist, the tally sheet, and made a copy for the CARICOM team. So they had access, even though their direct observation was 18% of the total, let's say, hours in a station. They had access to all of the information coming out of the exercise. Mm-hmm. So the 18% does not concern me. They are able to make a pronouncement on the entire exercise because they have enough information. Secondly, their conclusions coincide with those of the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry, who, along with the Private Sector Commission and other organizations, were able to get data on 100% of the exercise.
Great. Well, with that, I wanted to let's take a quick break. We were right back, and I wanted to talk about the impact of all of this on the Guyanese society at various levels. So, Devin, your commercials.
Globespan 24/7 is offering professional streaming services. Be at ease and let Globespan 24/7 handle all of your streaming services for talk shows, religious programs, funerals, and birthdays. Get professional streaming done with ease. Globespan 24/7 professional streaming services will give you the peace of mind that you deserve. Call 631-782-9272. That's 631-782-9272. Or email sales@globespan247.com. January marks 1 year since Globespan 24/7 embarked on this initiative to offer a platform that brings in all sides, all points of view, and all concerns. Viewers in Guyana and across the world are participating in discussions that are bringing to light issues relating to social, economic, and political matters that have been plaguing our nation. Globespan's platform offers Guyanese to express their concerns and discuss solutions in the political realm, thereby addressing the polarized situation. Discussions also include social ills, such as alcoholism, domestic violence, and suicides that have been plaguing the people. The platform also mitigates the brain drain by having speakers that live in Guyana and across the world participate in these discussions. This concept will avail a broader view for the benefit of all Guyanese, so Globespan needs your support to offset the expenses. Kindly contribute by clicking the link in the description to help support these programs.
Welcome back, and a special thanks to Globespan for bringing these shows religiously on Mondays and Wednesdays. We want to thank Nohar Singh and Devin and their team for a fantastic job. While we're all hunkered down, amongst all the pandemics, we were able to share ideas and learn about what's happening. I want to also remind our viewers that while the discussion is heavily tainted towards a PPP sort of discussion, we do invite on a regular basis APNU representatives. As you would imagine, of those who are following Globespan, in most cases they've opted out for reason I'm not aware. But I'm quite sure at this stage of Guyana's development, we need their voice. We need to understand what's driving their thinking so that all Guyanese can benefit. So we were talking about GCOM and Lowenfield and the impending CCJ case, and we've got something happening on the 1st of July. And I know Shuman, you want to complete your thoughts on what you believe will be or what will happen after GCOM, after the CCJ on July 1st.
Well, Salim,
by the way, July 1st is Canada Day, right? And you were once a Canadian.
That's correct. Well, I'm not a Canadian anymore, but thank you for recognizing that. But Salim, before we started into this recon, the Liberty and Justice Party wrote the chair and the commission, the Guyana Elections Commission, asking for Mr. Roxanne Myers to be removed and Mr. Claremont Mingo to not be engaged, and anyone that was that was part of the recon process at the Ashman's building and at GCOM's headquarters, for them to be removed from the recon process. And what populated the observation report, it's a bit farcical and troubling at the same time, because the issues contained therein, as Nick said, is just a wholesale of APNU's allegations that infiltrated the system and that they're taking for fact, which now brought us to this point, and we're going into the process here. I want to suspect that after July 1st, that we are going to wait maybe 3 or 4 days for a ruling, and when that ruling comes out, it will come out in favor of democracy in Guyana. And when that is done, pardon me, someone's trying to call me here.
Okay.
Yeah. So when that is done, we are going to go through another episode of it being pushed now from Lowenfield, where he's going to be in contempt of not following the chair's command. These people keep unfortunate. We're going to be pushed into where Mr. Lowenfield is in contempt of following the commission's command. Someone really wants to get a hold of me. It's unfortunate at this hour. And then it is going to fall to Roxanne Myers, and Roxanne Myers is going to do the same thing, if not a worse job. And then we're going to get pushed down to another officer, to the point where the commission in itself will have to take the bull by its horns and say, this is what is done. And it is going to put the country in a very unfortunate position, because it would seem once again that we are infringing on the so-called ghostly win of the APNU AFC. Basically, we are going to have to wrestle this beast through every machinery and every avenue that exists, because I don't sense that Mr. Lowenfield and Ms. Myers would want to produce the numbers as prescribed by the process that we just concluded. So at some point, we are going to have to start looking at the commission in itself to take the bull by its horns and say, no, this is not it, and it is not going to sit well with the APNU AFC supporters because of what Moses Nagamutu and his ilk are doing.
Yeah. Did we lose the bishop, Devin?
Yes, he's rejoining now.
Okay, got you. Because I wanted to get him in on a question that's related to this. Well, I think generally the buck ends with the chairman. There is a chairman for GCOM who summoned one of our staff to provide a report. Welcome back, Bishop. I wanted to ask you specifically a question related to GCOM and its leadership. How much responsibility for all that's happening from election day until today lies in the hands or in the laps of the chairwoman? Yes, the CEO is rogue. Yes, the Region 4 REO is a rogue. Yes, there are probably many more rogues and leaks and so on. But shouldn't the chairwoman, be taking decisive leadership and take control of the situation and be clear? Because, your average Guyanese don't even know what she's thinking. She's never spoken to the media. She hardly speaks to the media, and nothing much comes out of it. And this is not an issue for the PVP or the PNC to resolve. This is an issue for GCOM to resolve. Where is her leadership at this moment?
Well, Seven, let me speak fairly on this. Remember, the Justice Claudette Singh was leapfrogged into a situation at GCOM in the middle of an electoral cycle after the passage of the no confidence motion. She is a judge, and what she does is listen and listen and listen and listen and listen, and for us, listens too much, and then she eventually decides. So I think it is her style. She takes a long time, and she gives everybody the full 9 yards, and then she decides, and then she acts and she writes.
Would you agree that for an average Guyanese that 4 months is a long time?
It is a long time. And I would have said before that she could have quelled and had a declaration since around the 7th or 8th of March, because all she needed to do was to instruct Mr. Keith Lowenfield to report to her office with the 2,339 original statements of poll that he had in his possession. The system allows for the chief elections officer, apart from returning officers, to get a copy of the original statement of poll from every polling station. So she could have seen those statements of polls and sat with Mr. Lowenfield and says, add them up and give me the numbers. I don't know why she did not act. We ended up at the recount.
I think every Guyanese
I saw the way.
question.
I didn't get that.
And I'm saying every Guyanese is asking the same question.
I think it's a matter of style, which is not what we are used to or what we are expecting. I would have liked to see her acting much faster with greater alacrity. I would have liked to see her moving in the interest of the seriousness of the hour. It's a government you're dealing with. You have to be decisive. You have to be quick, and you have to be going forward. I would have liked to see that. But I'm hopeful, based upon the affidavit that she supplied to the Court of Appeal in this Eslin Davids matter. It shows her thinking, it shows her firm position, and it shows her intention of how she intends to act. So if you read her affidavit, I've gone through the full 9 yards, we've had the recount, I've taken the battering from everybody in the media, the political commentators, including the Bishop Etchels of this world, have already had their say about me, but I'm ready now. I have 10 certificates that were certified by all the contesting political parties. I have numbers. It is my job as the chairman of GCOM to make a declaration. The chief elections officer is to bring me that report. I'm ready to act. And no court should interfere with me from carrying out my constitutional duties.
And I think that is what every Guyanese are expecting right now.
That's what every Guyanese wants. So I'm not going to apologize for her because I've been impatient with her. I've been on television being impatient with her. I've seen others doing it. But when I'm finished, I have to sit and think. She's a judge. And she's just been sitting there and listening to arguments and listening to arguments. And everybody who's agreed wants a quick decision because this thing is straight. It's clear cut. This thing is clear cut. The PPPC has won. Make the declaration. And I want to see that happen.
Yeah. But I think
I'm hopeful that she will do what is right.
Yeah, the bottom line, GCOM is not inventing a system. I think their mandate has been detailed in the laws of Guyana and the Constitution. So it's not like they have to invent anything. So her mandate and her task has been defined. But let's move the conversation.
I believe she's been too dependent on the technical staff at GCOM. As a new person coming in sometime late last year, my view is that she's been too dependent on Mr. Lowenfield and the other team there. She's been relying on them for the technical advice, but I think it's now clear in her mind that Mr. Lowenfield is either participant, is either the architect or the facilitator of a rigging plot to ensure that the PNC-led APNU AFC foist themselves continually upon Guyanese, and he has nothing to do with fairness. He has breached his statutory oath that he has taken. I think it's clear in her mind that she was set up, relying on these people as professionals, and they've taken her down a path. Let us spoke about it. He couldn't get a report into her because of a notice of motion. But even while the matter was in the courts, he was able to get a report in with Mingo's fraudulent numbers in that he wanted them to consider. Yeah. So I think it's clear before her.
We wait to see what his role is moving forward, especially after July 1st. I think that role might be very minimal, I assume. But let's move the conversation forward. This is all causing a lot of strain, a lot of frustration, and a lot of apprehension by the Guyanese population at every level. We are operating without a government at the moment. There's a caretaker with limited powers and limited access to funds. We have no budget, and we see certain areas are being grossly affected. I mean, you've got the sugar industry. Gaisuko is there's no money for that. You know, national reserves are down to very very little amount. There is a shrinking of hope even in Guyana. So, Nicholas, I wanted to your take on how do we move forward. It doesn't seem like this is going to end in the next month or two, and we've got bills to pay. We have a country to take care of. We've got infrastructure to maintain. How do we move forward without a government, and worse yet, without a budget?
Well, the thing is that we are limping along. I mean, businesses are doing what they can do, and the issue is that the agencies who are spending and supposed to be receiving, their subventions, they're now spending according to the rules. I think now it's about 1/12 of what they should have been spending before when they did have a subvention. Yeah, so, and government in Guyana is a very large actor in the economy. They do a lot of procurement and they do a lot of works and purchasing. So as a result of those funds not flowing in the economy, you have issues. Then you get to the government-owned, the government-owned companies that are running as independent companies like Gaisuko, which has basically run into a cash crunch because it hasn't gotten a subvention. It does not earn enough, as compared to its expenses. And now we're kind of stuck. So the rural areas are going to be very hard hit by that because Gaisuko and those communities provides an ecosystem for the businesses. Funds go into Gaisuko, then you get wages to the workers and you get procurement to the businesses in the surrounding communities. So they're going to be very hard hit. So on a whole, and then this is an environment within which we're operating on the coronavirus. Today, I had a meeting with some of my members who are in the education sector because we were trying to understand what are the plans for school children going forward and what would the September school term look like. The members said to me that, but who's the Minister of Education? Who are the policy leaders in the space? Who are there to kind of take the mantle up and say, okay, well, this is the direction we're going. We are definitely not going to be bringing students back into the classroom, or we are going to be bringing students back into the classroom, but safely. So who is that person? So you can see on all of these levels, how the lack of having a fully functioning government in place, and especially in the situation where we know that the government has lost the elections and that the ministers who were in place before are not going to be in place. So it's hard to treaties or interact with these persons on policy directions because it's only a matter of time before the law takes its course.
Yeah.
So it is impacting not just businesses, but everyday lives.
Yeah. What kind of, I know the GCCI and the Private Sector Commission and other business-related organizations, what kind of leverage have you guys been placing on current government on the way forward? Because this is ultimately your role as GCCI and private sector is to protect business and protect the economy. What kind of leverage have you guys been exerting?
I think one of the things we have to do is stop beating around the bush. The fact of the matter is that we are perceived to be PPP. It's no sense in lying about it. Because of our elections advocacy, we are perceived to be PPP now. And because of that, it has been hard to interact with any sort of policymaker from a ministerial level. We did have some interactions with, for instance, the Minister of Business early on in the COVID-19 pandemic. But we were invited to have a seat in the COVID-19 task force and then never met with anybody higher than the Minister of Business in the COVID-19 task force. You gotta understand the business community, has a number of various sympathies, political sympathies. You can't paint us all with one brushstroke. I represent over 300 plus members, all of whom I guarantee you did not vote PPP. Some may have, some voted APNU AFC, some may have voted to some of the new parties. The thing is, we are here to work with the government of the day. But where this elections process is that you're in a twilight zone. And
Mhm.
so because of our advocacy, we haven't seen a lot of interactions at the policy making level with government.
And Bishop,
Salam, can I jump in there?
sure, go right ahead.
I want to touch on something that seems to have escaped the minds and eyes of the public and the policymakers. And last night I went on Facebook Live and said people should not politicize the COVID-19 pandemic. And it is unfortunate that I have to walk back on those words, per se. Today, Region 9, and they're very disturbed at what has happened in Region 9 in addressing this pandemic. And the word from these communities, these far-flung communities, remember Regions 1 and 9 are heavily populated with indigenous peoples. And these communities have taken the position at this point that they have not voted for the APNU AFC administration, thus no support is being given to them. No support is being sent their way. When you look at the hotspots in Guyana right now for the rise in COVID-19 cases, it happens in regions 1 and regions 9. And those two regions, very specifically in the far-flung areas, are where the APNU AFC would have lost resoundingly. So it is unfortunate that the reaction to the COVID-19 pandemic has taken on a different political dimension. It is very unfortunate that we're at this juncture. I looked at the numbers. I know what's going on in these communities. And when you were to send out a Sidney Alicock, Don Hastings, or Valerie Gridalo to these communities and think that they're going to command some degree of respect, the people on the ground are simply saying, we cannot respect you because you do not respect our votes. So they don't have that kind of command on the ground. They don't command that kind of respect anymore. So it further exacerbates the situation on the ground for these people. And there's level of the COVID task force to these far-flung communities.
Well, that's the ugly side of political victimization, and if it's this early and that's happening, God knows what will happen next. But Bishop, I won't bring you back in. The economy will be should the PPP assume office, whenever that happens. The economy will be the mountain to climb, the challenge to take on. Whether and over the last year, we've been digging a hole basically and going deeper and deeper. Cash is becoming scarce. Investor confidence is waning. There's no stimulus, so people got poorer and poorer over the last months. What should we expect from the PPP? I'm not expecting you to give me the full details, but at least the posturing of the PPP administration as it relates to the economy and looking at investors' confidence and generally lifting everyone out of the rut that we've been over the last few months.
Well, it's not a difficult question to answer since our president in waiting has already addressed this matter. The people of Guyana could be assured that President Mohamed Fanali will take command of the short-term needs of Guyanese businesses, families, communities, because we understand the suffering. Remember, we are not yet in government, but we've been, and we have our ears and hands and legs across this country. Mohammed Irfan Ali has established a task force and have been working with various sectors, people, broad-based groups, consulting, engaging, and developing policies and plans. So what would be 4 steps? We have to get a budget urgently. So once the president is sworn in, you could expect very soon a parliament being inaugurated. Mm-hmm. And once a parliament is inaugurated, a budget. Right now, the illegality, the squandermania, the corruption that is taking place, and it's all being done under the guise of necessity. You know, the people in the APNU, AFC created a crisis, and then they want to invoke the doctrine of necessity. Now, when there is no budget, you could only spend up to 1/12 monthly of the current. They cannot be capital. And what Nicholas was talking about, the fact that there is no capital budget is where you have the problem, because you're paying salaries, you're buying stationery to run the office and paying utility bills. But the capital budget is not in place. But this government, in as much as there is no capital budget, have been spending enormous sums on the capital side without any parliamentary cover. For example, we just learned they have given $352 million to BK International for a sea defense work. That's a capital budget. They have expended almost $1 billion on the Ocean View International Hotel. That's capital works. The GPL have been spending $600 million almost to buy some bucket trucks. That's capital expenditure. And I could go through and go through, but everything that they have done as it relates to capital expenditure is to facilitate themselves. Put a project out there, award contracts in the sums that are exorbitant so that they could get the cream of it for themselves, because if we have to come out to government, we ain't going out broke. Well, some of them are not broke, but some of them are making their last handshake at this particular time. So we have to bring the economy back into a state of rule of law and proper financial governance and ensuring a financial architecture. Salim, let me tell you, there are business people, and Nicholas would know about that, who can't pay their rent. Store owners who cannot pay their rent. People have been reduced to poverty in such a manner and so quickly that it's unexplainable. But you know what people are saying to us? We're struggling because we know the thing coming. Long term done, short term left. We know we're going to get through. We know you are going to fix it. So the responsibility that is on the shoulder of Irfan Ali's cabinet and government is so enormous. We have to be able to come in. They have run down the reserves. They have basically destroyed the gold reserves. We have increased the debt. Non-performing loans have gone skyrocketing. The economy is in shambles. There's no investor confidence. The private sector, the local private sector, has hardly invested anything for the year to keep jobs and to create new jobs. People are getting 2 days, 3 days work. People have opted for half salaries or just a stipend to keep things going. So we have to get in there and quickly. And I believe that President Irfan Ali, once he takes the oath of office, he has been developing the plans, he's been consulting, he's been engaging various stakeholders, and we're going to hit the ground running. So if there's something that I could say to all Guyanese, let's get this electoral cycle over quickly. Let this process conclude quickly. And we hope to have a definitive ruling from the CCJ. Once we get a definitive ruling from the CCJ, GCOM would be able to complete its work. We have a president installed. You're going to have a duly elected parliament. You're going to get a budget. A lot of the measures that will be put in place would have to help to stimulate businesses, stimulate investment. While we are stimulating business and investment, bringing immediate relief to hurting families and communities.
Yeah, and Schumann, you of course will have one seat in Parliament to join the group, and I'm quite sure you will want to use it as wisely as possible. What are you expecting from an economic perspective to work with whoever wins the next election, whoever goes into government? What are you expecting from them, and what are you looking to support them with and for?
Well, at the rate at which we've seen Mr. Mingo and Mr. Keith Lowenfield and them go, I'm hopeful that maybe we could get Mr. Edgehill to declare the Liberty and Justice Party the winner, and then we could move on. But I don't. You know, all of these numbers are coming out of a hat.
News. Let's have that as breaking news, Lennox. Breaking news.
Breaking news.
So all of these numbers are being pulled out of a hat. Why not just pull out the numbers and say the Liberty and Justice Party won, and let's move on? But in terms of your question, we have, well, our plan was short term, medium term, and long term, pretty much in line with what every political party had put out there. I mean, I have not had a chance to absorb the APNU AFC's manifesto because we know their manifesto has failed the country in the last 5 years.
Absolutely.
And to give them another 5 would have been failure. But what we want to see is very robust regional development where there is a change in the regional fiscal structure, and to see the far-flung communities, the indigenous communities, get a piece of the pie. If you look at the oil and gas sector, for example, if you look at the majority of the economic engine, it resides in the coast, on the coast, and the indigenous and far-flung communities never get an opportunity to tap into that, never get an opportunity to be part of that. So what we want, we don't want equalization, we don't want handouts. What we want is a piece of the pie so that we could also become part of the economic development engine of this country. And we've got an agenda in how we could get that done. We don't want to displace people. We don't want a redistribution of wealth. What we want is an opportunity to have equity operational in this country. And I think with any administration that goes in there, provided that they're open to dialogue, we fully intend on engaging them in that way.
Nicholas, what are you expecting from the next administration in the short and medium term to kind of bring and arrest the current slippage in the economy and in business activities? What I'm quite sure you're sitting with your GCCI team and you're brainstorming, what approaches need to be taken, how you're going to be partnering with whoever wins on moving the ship. So, what are some of those initiatives you believe that you guys will be considering or advocating for in the short and medium term?
Well, so the answer is stimulus, right? Because right now, as the bishop said, businesses are hurting. So essentially, you have high unemployment. You don't have a lot of cash flowing in the economy. So therefore, we need government to step in and provide stimulus. Of course, further, as the bishop said, it is a challenging time itself for government because their revenues are declining, and they have obviously seen the Bank of Guyana balance sheets, and their foreign exchange reserves have declined as well. Mm-hmm. I do not envy their position. I expect that they are going to have to go to multilateral financial agencies or multilateral lenders and borrow in foreign currency, as well as aim to get a hold of the revenues that have already been have accrued from the first two sales of cargoes, and pump that into the economy somehow, because again, it's the situation is so bad. This is kind of throw everything in the kitchen sink, and in pure economics, you have to go into deficit spending. So you cannot look to balance your budget right now. You're gonna have to spend more than you earn, and then later on you're gonna have to recover it back in taxes. It's no businesses. I'm sure once I say the word taxes, every businessman listening is gonna cringe. But the idea is that as government, you need to go into deficit spending now using your fiscal policy. And then for your monetary policy, they're going to need to work with the banks and somehow bring down the commercial lending rates to increase liquidity in the system so that on the two levels for economic policy, your fiscal policy and monetary policy, on the fiscal side, they're putting stimulus in. Stimulus can also be capital projects. They can go on a massive amount of capital spending, which will put funds back into the economy. For instance, as funds are spent into construction companies for rehabilitation of roads, and then those construction workers go back and spend those funds in the communities that they're working. It's called the multiplier effect.
Yep.
And then for the liquidity, looking at it from a monetarist point of view, when you bring down those lending rates, businesses are going to look at it and say, well, a lot of the projects we were thinking about, the cost of investing in these projects are being reduced, and the profitability of them are going up. We might as well take the funds from institutions like the commercial banks and pump those funds back into our business and either go on an expansionary measures, but it is hire more staff, add new product lines if you're a manufacturer, add new capital equipment to increase production. So that's what I'm hoping the next government will do. And then, once we get out of the pandemic situation, we can look at how they can adjust the tax situation to adjust the debt levels they would have taken on to do that sort of let's call it stimulus spending and easy monetary policy.
How much of the policy making process is the private sector were involved in over the last 5 years, and do you expect to be more involved moving forward, given the pressures on the economy?
Well, the previous government did involve the private sector during their budget consultations, and I think one of our sister organizations had a roundtable with the Minister of Finance. So we have had interactions with them, but I would say that not as much as the government prior. And the reason why is that the government prior, they were out of the national competitive strategy, and then the further development strategies that came out of that. There were certain government agency dialogue bodies that were set up, which forced the policymakers to have to meet with the private sector on a regular, if not monthly basis, in and outside of just the simple one-off annual consultations. And that forced a lot more interaction and a lot more information going back and forth between the policymakers of that day. So we would like to see those dialogue bodies re-implemented so that we can have a say in policymaking.
Absolutely. I think there's definitely need and it's program time. We're almost done. So Bishops, I'll give you the first stake to make your statement and your closing statement. And bearing in mind, as you make your closing statement, I wanted to ask a question out there. You don't have to answer it in full details, but what's the driver behind APNU not conceding? There's got to be more than just some people want to grab power and some piece of land and money and so on. What's fundamentally rotten with our system that's allowing a party that knowingly and verifiably and credibly aware that they have lost not concede?
I can tell you that first. They got too much to hide. They are scared of what will be discovered when they're out of government. Every one of them, they've got so much to hide. And that's what I will speak to that right now. It's not just about them not being democratic and wanting to grab power. They are scared. They've got too much to hide. But let me just say to Nicholas and then to Lennox, because they're both from constituencies. To Nicholas, we could assure you the next PPPC government under President Irfan Ali will return to structured economic planning and economic development. We had rolled out our poverty reduction strategy. We had the national development strategy. We had the low carbon development strategy. These were all consultative mechanisms that brought about these strategies that the private sector were aware of the role they can play, how they can invest, and how they could branch off. When it comes to oil and gas, we will manage it in such a way that with a proper local content policy, the private sector will be at the center of that and they will be able to benefit. For Shimon, you can tell the people tonight when you get off this program in Region 1 and Region 9 that a representative of the PPPC told you that when we get into government, we will revive the village economy. We will rehire more than 2,000 Amerindians, community service officers, which will put almost $700 million back into those communities spending on an annualized basis. We will expand the presidential grant. We will work with Amerindian communities to ensure access to the coast and markets for their products. And we just like to remind that you can tell them, we've promised that within 3 months of being elected, we will bring together all of the Amerindian leaders to listen to them. So we will know what are their immediate needs, and that is how we will venture out into Amerindian development through a consultative process. For the rest of Guyana, we want to let you know that everything that we said in our manifesto, we thought it through. It was doable. The issue with Gaisuku, of them trying to sell Gaisuku, sign a sale for Gaisuku before they get out of office, is something that we will have to handle. But we have promised the sugar workers that we will reopen the estates. We will get them back into work. We will work with Gaisuku to ensure it comes to a place where it can become viable, whether it's for privatization or what are the next steps. But you could expect we will be going in a direction of, one, creating employment, resuscitating the economy, reviving investment, both local and international, and ensuring equal opportunity and equal access for all of our Guyanese. The depressed communities will be addressed. Poverty will be addressed because the PPPC is a pro-poor party, pro-working class, and we continue to understand the plight, listen to the people, and bring relief to them where it really matters. We are proud of our democratic credentials and our working class credentials, and we will be working in such a framework to ensure that every Guyanese become part and parcel of the economic development and have a part of the economic pie. So Salim, thank you for having me on the program tonight, and Nicholas and Lennox, in our future coming weeks, we in the PPPC look forward to working with you from the joiner party and the smaller parties, from the private sector, from other stakeholders, because we will be a government that will operate according to Article 13, where we will consult with the people in the formulation of our policy. So good night, and thank you for having me on this program.
Thank you, Bishop. And Lennox, your final thoughts as we make the final turn on this saga?
Well, I won't be as long as Juan there, but I want to say thanks to you, Salim. Thanks to Nohar for having us on the program. Nick, it's been nice chatting with you, and Bishop, same with you. We look forward to the conclusion, the legitimate and decisive conclusion of these electoral process to simply move this country forward. We have been stagnated for too long. It has been 19 months in the making to this date. And we look forward to concluding this process decisively. In terms of what these folks have, why it is that they want to hold on to power, I quite agree with Edgehill on that topic, that there is just too much to hide. It can no longer be about denying democracy and all of these things. there are certain people who would have pushed themselves so far out on the limb that they are afraid of the long arms of the law touching them, and they want to find every possible avenue to avoid that. Um, we are hopeful and we look forward to the Caribbean Court of Justice and how justice will be dispensed. And when that is done, for all Guyanese to find a way to put the battle axe down, and let's work towards building this country of ours.
Thank you, Lennox. And Nicholas, your final thoughts on what's going to unfold and what's going to happen?
Well, what I like to do is to recognize that I'm hoping that the second generation of the PPP and a lot of these new stars, such as Lennox, such as Timothy Jonas of ANUG, and then in this, when I say second generation of the PPP, you have Dr. Irfan Ali, but then you have young guys, for instance, our former president of the Chamber of Commerce, Diadat Indar, he became a candidate for the PPP. I hope that all of them can work together and really push us out of this pandemic that we're experiencing, the COVID-19 situation, plus what it's doing to the economy.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that they bring the policies that the business community needs, as well as the average citizen, because the business community exists to provide products and services to the average citizen. So if the average citizen on the street isn't doing well, then we are not going to do well. And I am very excited because I think that they've all shown, leadership in very tough times. And I really look forward to the next parliament, to seeing these guys on display, pushing policies and holding everybody accountable, including the PPPC. So making sure that they don't go easy on them.
Yeah, well, definitely Guyana. And thank you again, Nick, and thank you all my guests. And I want to thank all my viewers for staying on and listening to this conversation. We spoke about the current situation and the bizarre activities over the reports, the fourth report. We talked about some of the impact that it has and some of the ways that we need to move forward, especially with the economy. And while the economy is on the front burner and while the economy is critical for Guyana's survival, there's another area that that needs to be mended over the next year, and this will be mended through goodwill, will be mended through the Constitution and other institutions, which is trust between our people. In as much as one party is going to win the next election, there'll be one party and their supporter who will be standing on the outside. And I know there's talk about, inclusive and better governance and all that kind of stuff, but the perception remains that a tremendous amount of Guyanese will feel as though they have no part to play, that they will not share in the resources. They will not be part of the power play that will be undertaken over the next 5 years. So economy is short term, definitely that we have to rebuild, but trust is what's going to keep us in the game now and for the next 50 years. So with that, I want to say thank you again, my three guests, and thank you, listeners. Thank you, Globespan and Devin, and we thank God for allowing us to still be in a peaceful state while we resolve some very, very fundamental and critical issues that are affecting Guyana's ability to move in the right direction. Thank you again. Good night, and God bless you all.
Thanks, Al.